Listening to One, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm here.
It's officially summer mode. We've gotten in the swimming pool now, so it counts.
It is officially
It's real.
summer.
It's here. Mm-hmm. It's here. It's hot.
It's very hot in Ohio.
Our electricity bill is starting to inch way up there with all the AC use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just because, It's just been really hot in Ohio. Like, unseasonably warm.
Yeah.
For this time.
Feels more like Florida. It feels rather tropical, very muggy.
If only
Yes.
there was water somewhere near. So.
If only there were a large lake very close to our house.
No, I don't want a lake. I have that crummy thing. I want a beach.
Oh, you want a beach?
Yeah, I don't care about lakes.
wanna-
That's not summer.
You want cocktails?
I
with
am not getting in a lake.
Fair. You want cocktails with the little umbrellas in them, and
I think my problem is that for the past 3 years, we've spent the first week of summer basically at the beach. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like this summer I'm just like, because we haven't gotten to do anything.
Yeah.
We haven't done anything.
it's very expensive to move and breathe in this country right now.
My summer recovery is not really working because, what do I do? What are we doing?
We're gonna have to get you to a beach. I think
Can't get there.
get this girl to a beach.
Yeah, I think it's just the dread of the world and the inevitable heat death,
Oh,
which has been recently actually happening. No? It's been a little warm. I mean, you have to admit.
yeah,
What was our heat index last week? Like 113?
something like that.
That's a lot for Central Ohio.
yeah.
I am not built for 113.
Yeah,
That's
toasty.
like swamp.
Toasty swamp.
Very hot. So, that's how summer is going. I would say it's fine.
Somebody send this girl a Mai Tai or something.
I would accept it. No, I think it's just been, the weather's been kind of crappy. So that makes it hard. Because it goes outside and it hurts to breathe. It's hard, and it's hard to breathe.
I'm drowning when I breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we went to a baseball game last week.
Oh, yeah,
and it
we
was
did.
miserable. And we were both like talking about, like, it felt like we couldn't catch our breath.
We were getting close to like feeling like heat stroke. Probably it was that
Yeah,
hot.
it just felt like-
just sitting there.
It just felt like every breath you took was like shallow because
Yeah.
you just like, it's wet. Mm-hmm. And that's not meant to work like that.
No, not so much.
We started a new show that Chelsea has been talking about for years,
Yeah,
and I like it. We started The Wire.
yeah. Kate's never seen The Wire, which is a very gritty show about Baltimore, basically, and
Well, their police department.
yeah, the police and their interaction with drug traffic in and around Baltimore, and it's
It's a good show.
it's very well done, but it is quite dark sometimes, but it's well acted. And
Yeah, it is.
having worked in Baltimore for some portion of my life, I have some interesting close encounters with some of the filming locations and politics involved in that show. So it's
I mean,
kinda
I
fun
feel
to
like
watch,
probably what is in The Wire is in most major urban city. Like the story of drug issues and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that that's probably a pretty common story, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's a special and particular focus on corruption in Maryland, though, which is kind of something that Maryland excels at, shall we say.
What a compliment to Maryland.
Political corruption and Maryland just go hand in hand. Wish I could tell you why, but yeah, kind of a mess. But anyway, yeah, we
Good
started
show.
watching that. We started watching it.
For All Mankind is back. That's a Apple TV.
Yes.
Obi-Wan on Disney Plus. I think those are the highlights right now. I'm in like the middle of an audiobook that I'm kind of enjoying. It's a murder mystery. I don't do those often. It's good.
Yeah.
It's a nice change of pace.
I'm just diving headfirst into all the nonfiction I can absorb right now. Like we've been watching documentaries and
Oh my gosh.
been listening to podcasts and
We've
I've been reading
watched
nonfiction books and
Some wild stuff.
Ooh, yeah. Class Action Park. I want to just go ahead and throw that out there.
My
It's
coworker told us about it.
yeah, it's a documentary. It's on HBO, right?
I think so.
I think it's an HBO thing, but it's about this crazy water park in New Jersey that was just like
Killed
an
people.
insane liability. Yeah, it killed people actually, more than one.
Yeah.
like it killed
People.
multiple people have died at this water park. No longer exists, but anyway, it's the story of that water park. We watched Screwball, which was about baseball's
drug
doping
peds,
era.
We watched, most importantly, Tread.
Oh yeah,
On
Tread.
Netflix.
Why don't you tell us about Tread?
It's a story about a guy. I really don't want to give too much away, but here's what I will say. A guy ends up being so upset with his town and the people who run it because he feels as though he has not been treated as he should have, that he buys, is it a backhoe? No, it's
Bulldozer, I think?
bulldozer.
A
He buys,
bulldozer.
okay, so this guy buys a bulldozer and he spends like an entire winter reinforcing it to be impenetrable by
Armoring
things.
it. He puts armor on it.
And then he drives it through town and just knocks over the buildings and the businesses of his enemies.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say.
And it's a true story. That's really
It's a
happened.
true story.
It sounds unhinged, but it actually did. I cannot believe that I
is
hadn't.
unhinged. Hold on, I need my coffee.
You need your coffee?
Yeah,
I can't believe I hadn't heard of this story before.
yeah. Also, I want to just say that the McDonald's worker who made this, not their best work.
That's when you were like, "Could I have 2 pumps, please?"
asked
And
for
he's like,
2 pumps of
"Well, you said you wanted
sugar-free
extra,
vanilla."
so I gave you 8." Like that's a reasonable number of pumps of
I
syrup.
just went to the dentist yesterday and I feel like I need to call them back
Yeah.
and be like,
You
can
need
you
to
actually
get-
see me tomorrow?
You need to get back in there ASAP. Okay, well, so
Anyways.
yes, back to this episode for which we have gathered you
Wait.
all.
We have decided to do our first annual
Yeah,
year in review,
yeah.
even though we've been doing this podcast since 2020.
Yep. We decided to establish a new tradition. It's a new tradition. I was like,
Okay.
okay, let's celebrate you getting through the school year.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do something that is fun for us to do that, this one, not the sort of research that we regularly do. So it's like fun for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go through we prepared some lists of like really fun things that we have learned over the past year, because we usually do a segment what we've learned in every single
Yeah.
pod episode. So now we're kind of doing a year in review because this is a podcast about learning. We're going to take you through a year of interesting stuff.
You took this assignment a little bit more broadly than I did.
That's okay.
Mine are just like facts.
Yeah, that's fine. We surprised each other.
Also
So
spelled
we,
Atlanta wrong. Okay, I'm back. So how do you want to handle my facts
yeah.
and your
my
greater
essays-
knowledge of the world, apparently?
So we prepared these in secret from one another. We did not tell each other what we were doing beforehand because I did want it to be broad. So we it's fine that we chose different things.
I don't think that had to be a secret for us to never be near each other on this list. Trust me.
So let's
I
just-
could have broadcasted it on the wall and you still wouldn't have chosen these things.
Why don't you just kick us off? Or maybe I should, because I have one. I think I have one more.
Well, I
And
have
then
one
you-
more that I can throw in if you want me
Oh,
to
okay.
start with
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Start with that. So we're gonna go every other one, and we don't know, and we're gonna teach each other some things, along with all of you, lovely listeners.
So this is just another bad reflection on something.
Oh, okay.
We went and saw the new Jurassic Park, and it's a no. That's
Yeah.
my number one.
Oh, the number one thing you learned is just
Just
don't see the new Jurassic
don't.
Park movie. Yeah, it was bad.
Okay, your turn.
It was solidly bad.
Nope, that's it.
Okay.
I don't want to give it
There's
any
gonna
more
be-
time.
There's going to be no more
It
discussion.
deserves no more
Okay.
discussion.
0 stars.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my first thing that I learned a lot about this past year was, broadly speaking, social infrastructure, which is a term that I am borrowing kind of from some of the books I read. So I've talked about Palaces for the People on the podcast several times because I think it's great. It's a book mostly about, a lot about libraries, but also about other public social spaces, public, like social infrastructure. So, like playgrounds, housing that lets family members of all ages cohabitate easily, intentionally designed public spaces that build community and enhance human connection. So, yeah, I read Palaces for the People. I read Citizenville, which is kind of ghost written, but it's Gavin Newsom's ghost written project, which is interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was kind of like he's a little But the book itself had some interesting stories about public-oriented projects that he had kind of led, especially involving technology.
But he didn't write it?
Well, it was ghostwritten, I'm pretty sure.
Oh.
Yeah, most politicians get ghostwriters to write their books. But anyway, yeah, just some interesting jumping off places in all of these books, but just kind of learning broadly about maybe how this country doesn't invest at the level that it should in some of these things, and how many of the social problems that we have are actually solvable. I think it was kind of hopeful.
Imagine.
Well, it was hopeful to hear that there are people working on these really difficult problems, and hopeful to know that some people are committed to, bettering our country in these different ways. So
I like that.
Yeah. All right, your turn.
Okay, Libby. I keep talking about Libby, but it's my favorite app right now.
Libby.
It's the one that you use your library card with to get access to ebooks and audiobooks, and I really like Libby right now. I don't want to go to the library. I don't do a lot of reading physical books. And so I've been getting my mileage out of Libby for sure.
Yeah, there are a couple of other apps. I think the really popular one's called Overdrive. Is that right? There are a couple of other library digital asset management apps that libraries use. So just check in if you have access to your local public library. Check their websites. Just go see if they happen to have memberships with these applications, because it's a really easy way to have access to tons and tons of titles for free instantly, and it's great.
I feel like in the past year that's been one of my big pushes. I mean, I still have my Audible account and use my audiobooks there, but Libby's been fun because it's given me a chance to read a lot of books that I might not have wanted to use an Audible credit on, but I was still interested in enough to hold them. Right. So it's been good.
Cool.
Okay.
My next thing.
Yeah.
I learned
this list is exactly number 2 for you.
Well, yeah. I'm okay. So I learned how to start companies because I started a company in the past year. I formed an LLC for some of my technology related projects that I work on, and other things that are going to be upcoming. It's just sort of like a catch-all for some of these projects. But yeah, I went through the process of doing all of that and drawing up all the paperwork and having some advisors look over everything. And now I'm working on business plans and all kinds of stuff. So it's, and I'm also involved with a couple of startups, like early stage startups, and kind of working with them to develop products and stuff. So it's been, I've felt fortunate to be able to get in at the ground floor of a couple of different exciting projects. But I also feel like I've talked with you about this, but I've decided to sort of embrace what I suspect is undiagnosed ADHD and just build a kind of career out of many different projects, because my brain likes to work on different things and to be entertained by different things. And
it's my worst nightmare.
I don't know why. It's great for me. I like it. Why is it your worst nightmare?
I just mean, I am not someone who can have a lot of pots on the stove at one time.
I see.
And you can have 3 or 4 ovens worth of pots that you're handling. And that is someone who has been diagnosed with OCD like me. That's like my worst nightmare. Because in my head, all I would be thinking about, and I even get pseudo stressed for you because I'm like, oh, but what about all these things that you're always talking about? And it makes me anxious for you.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
And so that's what I mean by my worst nightmare, is because I don't do projects. Like if I do something, it's completed. They don't exist
That's not
for
true
long
for me.
periods of time. And so when you're like, oh, I have one more thing, I'm like, ugh, where does it go in your brain? Because my brain can't do that.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to capitalize on what I know is this, and kind of related to this note, I've started. I'm starting to make a journey into exploring my own mental health, because, like I said, there's probably some touch of something going on there that is driving some of the ways that I, behave. But anyway, so that's been fun to think about that more actively and to spend more time working on that stuff. But in parallel, I've just decided, okay, well, as long as I can put some discipline and structure around certain parts of this process, the way my brain works, which is just, I have so many different interests and I don't really want to be stuck pursuing any one of them career-wise exclusively.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do that because I feel like I would get bored because I have so many things I love to learn about and I'm interested in doing. So I've just kind of embraced that, where it's just like building a career out of all of these interesting little building blocks that maybe none of them become this huge monolithic successful giant company, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a really fulfilling career doing all of the stuff that you love to do. So that's what I've been that's my that's my my bullet point. How about your next one?
Well, my next one is that when you look at your weather app and it says whatever the percentage of rain is,
yes,
that actually isn't the likelihood of it raining. It's the amount of area that's going to experience rain at that time.
I remember you.
So I used to think this was. I was told this by my ag teacher.
Okay,
my coworker.
I heard you talking about this a few weeks ago, and I didn't know how it got brought up. But this is
well,
interesting.
It's just that. So when you look at your phone, if it says like there's a 40% chance of rain, that actually doesn't mean there's a 40% chance of rain. It actually means that in that area, 40% of the area
will be experiencing rain at any one moment in time. For that
hour or however long it tracks.
That kind of makes sense, actually.
I think that makes zero sense.
Well, it makes more sense because
I want to know the chances of me getting rain.
Well, that's the thing, is that you can't, because you can't pinpoint where a cloud's going to go.
Yeah, you're right.
Is an area defined as like a zip code or like a...
Yeah, I think it's probably whatever you have the area of your phone set to.
Gotcha. So based on whatever it determines your location to be, it says within like a certain radius. There's...
I don't know what the distance is.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, like my rain or like my, my weather app is for like our
that
village. So it's like, I don't know if it's just, I didn't go any further into it to know exactly how far, but I know that it just means that 40% of the area will get rain.
Neat. So that doesn't make sense to you? You don't like that?
No, I would rather know what's the chance of me getting rain right here. Right here.
Right in this
I want to know
space.
As Eeyore, when the rain pops up over my head, how likely it is to hit me. That's my goal.
Eeyore.
He told me that and I was like, that's nice. Anyways, and then I was like, wait a minute.
Wait, I have to do some math now.
So that means that like 90%. Right, means that like everywhere in your area is going to get rain, whereas like 30 or 40% means only those smaller parts of your. It's kind of wild.
I can get that. So it's more like I kind of just picture it as like a radar image. If I were to look down and put a border around a zip code,
so
50% of it would be full.
50% of Dayton will get rain in this hour.
Yeah, it makes sense. But that wasn't how I would have thought of it.
No, I definitely thought that meant there's a 40% chance of rain.
Yeah. Well, that's how everybody kind of says it in the comment, when they just talk about it. That's how people
because none of us know. It's because nobody knows the truth about how math works.
We're telling the truth on this podcast, okay?
This is it. This is the first time, but we are doing it.
We're truth tellers.
Okay, what's next for you?
Okay, so again, this is sort of has a lot to do with my day job working in technology, but I learned a lot about different consumer applications of AI, like and machine learning, and I'm not well equipped enough to not screw up the use of those terms. So if there are technologists listening to this podcast, they're probably going to cringe. But basically, fancy computer stuff that is generated by lots of data.
Me talking about technology.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to go into like a whole big monologue explaining what it is because, again, I don't really understand well enough to know what it is in a lot of cases. But I did learn I learned about some of the consumer applications of those technologies, which I can talk about because I used them over the course of the past year. So I've been using some tools that are built with machine learning. DALL-E, I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is like an image generation algorithm. So people are doing things like coming up with these short phrases and asking this algorithm basically to make an image for them, like art.
Really?
Basically. So they'll be like Mario Kart, except you're driving on the surface of the moon and Ronald McDonald is there. And it will generate an image of
those things
based on your description that may or may not be horrifying. Sometimes they're really scary looking.
I've never heard of those.
Yeah, so that's DALL-E. Copy.ai was just this free little tool that we found a couple of weeks ago that it kind of helps you brainstorm.
I think it was TikTok.
Yeah, I think maybe it was TikTok. It's tool that helps you write marketing copy and like content for, you know, blog post content, any kind of writing that you'd find on the internet, really. Product descriptions, you know, bios,
Yeah, it's
or
pretty cool.
whatever it is. But so I've been using it for some of the startup stuff that I've been working on, just to kind of like, because when it's your startup, it's very easy to sit there and think too hard about what
The words.
that you're trying to use to describe your own work, because you've so thrown yourself and engrossed yourself, you know, in this mess that you can't easily and quickly come up with copy. So it's like, it's kind of an interesting tool to sort of, I don't want it to write it for me completely, because it comes out sounding kind of weird.
Yeah.
It needs some zhuzh, but as
a
like
little
a kind of
wonky.
a brainstorming tool, it is sort of helpful. This Person Does Not Exist is another one that I think is really fun. And it's kind of like DALL-E, except it generates a person's face, a human looking face that looks completely 100% real, but it's an artificially, algorithmically generated person's face.
I have a hard time with that.
It's very creepy. If you
How do they
haven't
know
checked
that
it out,
person doesn't exist?
just go check out This Person Doesn't Exist, does not exist.com, and it will like show you a random image.
So that's what you use if you're going to be catfishing someone.
Yeah, people do use that tool for that purpose. They'll use it to generate fake
sad.
avatars for social media accounts.
That's
But
a
that
bummer.
doesn't make the technology any less cool. It just makes people awful. But, you know, nothing new there. And then the final one that I used was, and this actually has been getting some attention because it just came out of, it's just kind of coming into public use now, and they're going to start charging people for it. But I was in this basically like beta, I guess, test program for this thing called GitHub Copilot, which I have a lot of reservations about because of the way they built. So in AI and machine learning applications, there are these things, sets of data called training data, that you use to make your algorithm produce what you want your algorithm to produce. So with this Copilot thing, GitHub, which is like it's just a coding tool that versions your software as you work on it. With that tool, what they're trying to give you is code snippets. So as you're sitting there writing code, it'll suggest,
Anticipate.
yeah, it'll try to guess what you're doing and will spit out a chunk of code that may or may not be relevant to what you're trying to do. And sometimes it blows my mind how cool it is. Sometimes it's just terrible. But
Yeah.
the training data that they used was all open source. So they're going to be charging people to use the service pretty soon. Like, it's like $10 a month or something. They're coming out of beta, and they're going to start charging people. So you, with open source software, in the terms of open source software, it says you can copy and modify this and blah, 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 blah. The Copilot is not free or open source. So there are a lot of legal gray areas with this stuff, and it's going to continue to be a legal gray area as we get farther
That's
and farther
interesting.
into machines
Taking
being
over the
creepy.
world.
Yeah, taking over the world. So anyway, that coding tool is another thing that I just, it's fascinating. It's scary. It's also perhaps formed in an unethical way, but it's still mind-blowing to actually use it when it suggests something that is actually useful to you. So,
Interesting.
yep. Your turn.
My next one is kind of like your social infrastructure one.
Okay.
I've just been reading a lot about this. So it used to be, this has been years ago, that Airbnb was a great way to travel and a very affordable way to travel. And in the last couple of years, even as we've traveled, I've looked into Airbnbs for different cities, really, I would say across the United States. And I have just noticed that their fees and all of that has basically become so expensive that Airbnb isn't cheaper to use. And that used to be the appeal, was that it was much cheaper.
Yep.
So over time, you know, this has just sort of happened that Airbnb keeps getting more and more expensive. Well, pair that with the housing crisis that we have right now, and I would say that's probably all over the United States as well, just based on, you know, what I've read from most major cities. And what is happening, and this isn't the case everywhere, but there are a lot of people out there making a living off of buying up properties and making them Airbnbs, which takes apartments, condos, homes, whatever, off of the market for permanent dwellers, right?
Yeah.
And instead, these people may not ever be there, but it's definitely not their permanent home. And they might have 15 or 16 listings on Airbnb. So as you start hearing, or well, continue to hear about like New York and Nashville and all of these other cities where people are being forced out of their rent because they can no longer afford it, a lot of people are looking at things like this for being the reason.
Yeah.
So I was reading about Atlanta. And right now in Atlanta, there's 7,500 Airbnb rentals in Atlanta. Okay. So they just passed a new law in Atlanta that people cannot list more than 2 Airbnbs per owner, and one has to be your primary residence. So that means that Atlanta is going to be getting back like 4,000 rentals.
Wow.
For people who, you know what I mean, who need a place to live, to make it more affordable and to make it so that people have the chance to live there again.
Interesting.
But what that's going to do, obviously, is throw up the Airbnb rentals in the air, because that means there's going to be far fewer of them, which I suppose could work a couple of ways. But honestly, I really can't believe people are still Airbnb-ing everywhere they go, because it's just not that affordable.
Yeah.
But I think it's great that Atlanta is doing this. And because that's just excessive. Like, it's just such a broken system.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to see Atlanta doing this. And I hope that other cities will start to look at these things too. Because I know, like, DC is hit hard by this.
Yeah.
I know New York City is hit hard by this. Like, a lot. Nashville is one I keep talking about, because that was another one I just read about. But there are just so many places right now where people are being told, okay, your rent's going to go up $1,800 a month on top of what you're already paying. Well, they can't afford it. So then they leave. Well, then what happens? A venture capitalist or something else comes through, buys it up, puts it on Airbnb or VRBO or whatever those companies are. And it makes it so much harder for people to be there. And we actually have a friend in Columbus who has an apartment and recently found out that the apartment near hers is an Airbnb. And she's talking about how that kind of changes like the dynamic, because you're like, well, who's going to be there? Is someone going to be there? Do they know how to get in? Like, they're always asking her like where to park and what, like, and it's not like she's not going to help them, but it's just like a part of your life that you're like, I don't want to have to worry about these people who are staying, basically renting out this, apartment across from me, and what time they'll be home, or will they try to get in my door, just that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, I remember when Airbnb was first catching fire, there were a lot of cities, even around the world, really, they were all really pushing back against Airbnb rentals being legal in their city, because they were foreseeing
this problem,
many of these issues that we are now.
Well, I will say I have had a couple of great travel experiences in Airbnbs. My 2 favorite experiences in Airbnbs were small bonus homes on a permanent property. So that felt like the way to do it to
kind
me.
Of thing?
Yeah, the one was like a tiny home that was on this farm in Sonoma, so north of San Francisco in California, and it was so cool. There was like chickens and horses. It was just awesome. And then the other one was in Boulder, and it was their guest house. It was just, they had a garage and they added on to the back of it, and they built like this open floor plan, like 1 bed, 1 bath, like just a small thing. And it was like for their grown kids when they come to visit. But when they don't have grown kids coming to visit, they rent it out.
Cool.
So it was really cool. You know what I mean? That was actually a great way to visit those cities, because I knew someone there and they gave me like personal recommendations. So I think those are the cool things about Airbnb, but that's like not what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And that's being lost. And they're not cheap. Like, they are truly not cheap. Like, every time we have traveled in the last 4 years, it has been cheaper to get a hotel.
Yeah.
With more and better and more consistent and like amenities, I would say.
Think the other thing that I've been reading about that's starting to happen with some of these sharing economy, I'm lumping Airbnb into this, but like sharing economy companies, so like ride sharing and Airbnb rental, like, where the whole point is basically to, oh, come on, you can use your extra time and vehicle or home or whatever and earn a little cash on the side.
Yeah.
A lot of those companies were so heavily, the prices for them that consumers would pay were so heavily subsidized at the beginning to get buy-in and traction, like market traction. So they deeply discounted their prices with investment money, basically. And now all of that money has dried up. So they're starting to adjust prices. And also the economy is just a complete mess right now. So for a lot of reasons, the prices of all of these things have just been creeping up and up and up. And Yeah, I'm starting to read articles about like the demise of Uber and everything like this now, and it's just kind of wild. And like Netflix, you could see like Netflix, like some of these just big technology companies, but especially the sharing economy ones are probably going to continue to take hits in the coming years.
Yeah, it seems so. So good for Atlanta.
Yeah.
And if you are traveling, maybe keep that in mind, because this could be happening potentially in other cities that might change the rental opportunities there. It also didn't say what was going to happen to some of those rentals that might have already had future renting.
Right.
So
that's a mess.
Yeah.
It's going to be a mess.
So, but I'm happy for Atlanta, and I hope that catches on, because there are definitely cities suffering from this too.
Cool.
What you got next?
Okay, my next one.
You're plugging another podcast. How dare you?
I always do this.
I know.
We've talked about this many times, but I love 99% Invisible. It's a podcast about design and how the design of everyday things impacts our lives. This particular episode of 99% Invisible, it was called Broken Heart Park, and it's about the Dr. H. Philip Venable Memorial Park in the city of Creve Coeur.
Where is it?
It's a suburb of St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
So this whole episode, and definitely just go check it out. Again, it's called Broken Heart Park. It's the story of a city reckoning or failing to reckon with its history of racism. The park that is talked about was built on land that a very successful Black doctor purchased in order to build his family home. And basically this is the story of how the city subverted his attempt to even own a home in a place where other white residents did not want him to live. And it's very eye-opening. I think
it's like Dodger Stadium.
Yeah. But the episode covers a whole lot about the sort of history of racism and redlining and all kinds of stuff that, is important for people to know about. But it's a really kind of personal look at the history of racism in specifically with regard to housing in this country. So it's very interesting. Yeah. Yep. So just plug that episode. I'm not going to do any better summarizing it. It's just worth going to listen to that episode. But yeah, he lived and worked. He moved to St. Louis in like 1943. So he was working in Jim Crow era as an eye doctor at an all-Black hospital, and just a really interesting life and family and struggle with the city in which he lived, and his legacy of, now this park being named after him, and people in the town calling and leaving him threatening voicemail messages, and people in the town also calling and threatening people who wanted to report on the story even. So like that's how intense these things can be.
Jeez.
But yeah, really interesting story. One of my favorite kind of episodes from the past year podcast episodes I listened to. So we're checking out.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, my next one is very scientific. Are you ready? Siamese cats are born all white, and they gain their color throughout their life, and they're basically, this is the article I read, they're basically temperature-dependent albinos.
Temperature?
So they're a live kitty heat map, and where they are darker is where they are cooler.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's like why their noses and ears and like mouth area is darker, is because they're the openings to their body, so they're cooler than like their stomachs or whatever.
Did not know that.
Yeah, it was just a really fun Twitter thread that I fell down, and I had no clue. But that's why that's why some Siamese cats are much darker than others, or some are way lighter, and it's actually because of the temperature where they live.
Wow.
So the next time you see a darker albino cat, it's cold. Put a sweater on it.
It's cold. Put a sweater on it. Yeah.
But they did say that there are times where people have had to like put like socks or something, something on their cat and it'll change the color of their skin or their fur. Because it changes the temperature of them. So this one lady was talking about when her cat had surgery, it like totally changed on one side of him because his fur grew back in, and he looked like a big So it looked like carpeting, you know what I mean? Wow. Like a bad carpet job that had been put on his side.
Mood rings.
Yeah, he's basically they already are. It's a cat.
Living mood ring.
They were without that, but even more so with the color.
True.
But I had no idea. Huh. And I just think Siamese cats are so cute.
Yeah,
I just love their little crossed eyes.
They're very pretty.
So that was that was a big one for me.
Okay.
And because I sent it to you and I was like, did you know this?
I did not know that.
Because I could not believe what I was reading.
I would not have guessed.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, my next thing that I learned about, and I'm not going to go into it very detailed because it's going to just turn into a rant, but I learned a lot about rural broadband access.
Rural
broadband access, and also just internet access generally in this country, and how we have such a long way to go in both crushing terrible monopolies in the internet service provider space. Mm-hmm. It's just a bunch of monopolies, and they've bought all of your senators and representatives, and it's incredibly gross, and they get away with providing the worst service for the most money. And I don't know how it's legal, but it is. Somehow. But yeah, that's what I learned about.
That goes really well with my next one.
Yeah.
So, AEP, American Electric Power, that's one of the biggest providers in
Ohio.
I think Ohio, but also I think our section of the U.S. as well.
Yeah, I think it's like Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia,
yeah, they're
Kentucky
out here.
or something
like that.
It's just in this Midwestern area there.
So that's one of the major electricity providers, right? Mm-hmm. So we have had, we talked about earlier, how bad our weather has been, just the up and down in the heat. So recently we had a really bad line of storms come through, and it took out the power for thousands of people for days. And it was eerily similar to what happened in Texas during their ice storm.
Yeah.
So we have people without power for days and days on end who are not getting super up-to-date information on when the power will be back, who are losing medication, food, all types of things, right, because of the lack of power. Not to mention it was also over 100 degrees on the heat index. And so, of course, AEP decides that as part of their handling of it, they're going to tell all of the people who still have electricity to turn up their thermostats and to keep off all their lights as a way to conserve the energy. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, their downtown Columbus huge building is all lit up. Bright as just...
You're right, because there's a picture exactly of downtown Austin. Same exact thing with ERCOT that happened down there.
Yep.
I'll mention this real quick. There's a podcast called The Disconnect that is all about this Texas blackout situation that happened with that big ice storm, and like hundreds of people died and millions of people lost power. So it wasn't as quite as severe with the human cost of the outage here, but there was a human cost. But it's just, I remember that podcast specifically talked about the buildings being lit up in downtown Austin, and just like
AEP kept theirs lit up the entire time. So at the time there was of course a bunch of push on AEP, because we've also been told, because we have AEP, that expect our bill to go up and up and up. So not only did they decide to keep their building lit forever, they're also going to tell all of us who are already paying more what to do with our electricity if we did have it. And at first they were not going to offer any sort of support for those who lost food or medicine or whatever because of the response to restoring the electric. Mm-hmm. But I did read, and I'll include it in the show notes, NBC4 did report that that's one of the big stations in Columbus, that there could be some support for those affected. I wouldn't get my hopes up.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
But it also wouldn't surprise me if AEP's like, we to say something, because we look pretty goofy right now.
Yeah.
And I would just never understand how a power company who is telling people to turn off their lights and turn up their AC when it's 100 degrees has chosen to keep their building lit.
Yeah, that's a bit
That's going to
baffling.
just be hard for me to understand. They don't need a billboard at the moment.
It's a little much.
So
it's a little rich.
It's a little rich. It was pretty frustrating. We were very fortunate during that storm, but not everyone was. Mm-hmm. And so it was just frustrating even to watch, because we had friends very affected by it.
Yeah.
And it's not an isolated, like, I feel like when the Texas one happened, everyone was like, we knew this would happen with Texas. And then the one here happened, and I was like, were we paying attention? Or,
I mean, a lot of this happens in that podcast I was talking about, talks about this, but the regulatory landscape around utilities, and I mean, particularly in Texas, it's a hot mess, because their grid is cut off from the rest of the country's grid. It's its own thing. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, it's just always a mess. Never easy. The power grid is somewhat delicate and always on the verge of total collapse in this country, it feels like. Just because of
Somehow, yeah.
aging infrastructure, but also just the way that the power grid works. It's kind of like a very finely tuned machine, and if it happens to get a little bit out of balance, things get wacky really quickly and stuff physically starts breaking apart. So anyway, interesting.
So that's just been something I've just been keeping an eye on, and because I know when our electric bill shows up,
yeah,
there's going to be a service charge for all of this.
for sure.
And we're just keeping their lights on. So, okay, next.
I learned about the Windsor Hum. This is another podcast, 20,000 Hertz, that I've talked about many times on the show. But the Windsor Hum is just a creepy sound in Canada. And I don't want to give anything away, but it's basically like a whole bunch of people in this place in Canada could hear at random times this weird hum, and nobody could find out where it was coming from. And it's just a really interesting bit of investigative journalism trying to track down where this weird sound is coming from. And it would make some people absolutely nuts. Like they would hear it and feel like they were kind of losing their minds.
Make me insane.
Yeah. It's just this weird, low, rushing hum sound all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
And they don't know where it's coming from?
Well, they kind of think they might have found out where it was coming from, but I
won't ruin it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that was another cool thing that I learned.
Well, I want to
about.
listen to that one now.
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay, my last one. I saw a video of an alligator and what their body looks like when they're like underwater. So you know how alligators are very scary when they're like just at the surface because all you see is their big long nose and like their eyes
little
and they look
creepy
terrifying.
nostrils. Yeah.
Somebody had a video. I must have been at like a aquarium or something like that, but it was just of an alligator like floating like on the surface, like how we see them. And for some reason, I don't know what I thought alligators were doing with their bodies underwater. I guess I thought they were like in a straight line, like very like
Sleek and slim.
yeah. I was
streamlined.
expecting like streamlined. That's the word I'm
Streamlined
looking
predator.
for. Yeah, I was thinking like hands in, claws in, whatever they have. They don't have hands. What are claws? Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think they have claws either. What do they have? Anyways,
Arms
they have an arm
and
before.
I don't know what you call it
legs.
when it's. I don't know.
Anyways,
I'm just gonna not guess.
I was expecting streamlined. That's the word I was looking for. Something like sleek and ready to like go. Right.
Yes, right.
Because it's very intimidating to see them come
Built
floating
to
up.
move quickly in water.
They are like upright, arms and legs out, just like floating. Like everything's just out forward, and it's just like if we saw them before they attacked us, we would not be afraid of them at all. And it's a good thing that they're in such murky water because that's the only thing making me afraid of them.
Wow.
But now, I mean, I'm still gonna have a healthy fear of
Are you
alligators.
gonna try to go up and
but
hug
it's
them
gonna-
now?
No, but it's gonna remind me how stupid they look underwater. And I don't know what I thought was going on underwater. I really don't. I really thought it was like a power thing. They are not ready. They are just floating.
Okay.
Like legs out. It's hilarious. Their tails like drag.
I would have
I'll
never.
find a picture.
I would not have guessed. We can put it in the show notes.
I wouldn't have either, but why was that? Like, never have I seen an alligator's body underwater. I only ever see the head.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was hilarious. It was one of those things that just challenged everything I knew when I
Yeah,
thought I
yeah,
knew about
yeah.
alligators. But also, we're in Ohio, so the chances of an alligator are pretty slim. here.
Not very high right now, at least.
Not at the moment. Not until they get blown up here
when
somehow.
global warming shifts the entire
We'll be their
ecological
refuge.
landscape, I'm sure that they'll find a home here in Ohio, but we're not there yet. So
Yeah, I mean, those things are tough, but they don't look it.
okay,
Well, not if you see their body.
wow.
All right, last one for you.
Yeah, last one for me. I learned how to run a D&D game, and I actually need to schedule our next session, but I did learn how to become a DM of the nerdiest game in history, perhaps. So it's been a very fun and creative outlet. So that was
has been.
Yeah. We finished a campaign that lasted like 4 years with some other friends of ours, and then
was a
I
great
started
time.
my campaign, and so it's a lot of dorky fun.
Dorky fun. Anything else worth throwing out there?
No, I mean, I'm sure that there are plenty of, millions of things that I could have crammed into this episode, but it's just kind of a fun little chance for us to look back on the year, because I went back through my podcast listening history and found some of those things. It was fun to
I should have done that.
fun
I
to
went back through
revisit
TikTok
those.
and Twitter.
Yeah, TikToks. I glanced through some of those too. So yeah, it was a good school year for you. So I think most schools in the U.S. are getting out of session for the summer now, but happy end of year, and this has been our first annual year in
Merry.
review. Okay,
So
we also still have the fill in the blank.
We do.
Questions from. Oh, you want to do last episodes?
yeah, I can.
Okay.
Last episode's question.
Yes,
And it's Pride Month themed.
it is.
Because it's still June.
It's still Pride Month. Yes.
Okay. So, on the early morning hours of June 20th, 1969, the Stonewall Uprising occurred at the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street in Greenwich Village in New York City. The riot would go on for days with nearly a week of altercations with the police attempting to raid Stonewall because of it being owned by the mafia, which was the case for many gay bars during this time. Following the first night of rioting, gays and lesbians kept returning to the Stonewall to protest for their freedoms in their life to be who they are without the fear of being arrested, because at the time, you could be arrested just for being gay. The Stonewall riot is considered to be a watershed moment in the gay liberation movement, and it was very famously led by, among others, one incredible drag queen whose middle initial famously stood for Pay It No Mind. Who was she? And that's Marsha P. Johnson.
There are some really fantastic black and white photos of Marsha P. Johnson at the
What a hero.
at Stonewall. So
Yeah.
just if you see any photos of those events, you'll probably see photos of her.
Of Marsha.
Yeah.
She was deep in it and was heavily featured and was a hero.
Yeah.
So that's Marsha P. Johnson.
Okay, this episode's fill in the blank. Write into us. Hello at 1621.com, all spelled out. We will answer your email and we will adore it. We'd love to hear from you. Write into us, say hello, drop us a line. You can even answer the trivia question incorrectly and we will still send you stickers because we love you anyway.
And you deserve it.
You do. This week's question. Recently, Yellowstone National Park experienced historic flooding. Most of it took place in the northern part of the park. They're estimating now, and I'm sure there's probably more to come on these estimations, but early estimates had it maybe around $1 billion with a B to repair
A big old bee.
all of these washed out roads into and out of the park. It's a huge mess. There are a bunch of like walking trails and bridges that were also washed away, and like employee housing went floating down the river.
And people were stranded because they were in the part of the parks where
It was a huge mess, but this was like there was snow and then there was rain on top of the snow about a week later, and it caused insane flooding. So that just happened in Yellowstone, which is very sad because it's one of our favorite parks. So they're starting to reopen entrances. They just announced today that they're going to reopen 3 entrances to the park. So the question is, how many total entrances to Yellowstone National Park are there? How many entrances?
Yeah, if this was this time last year, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah, because we
recorded
we recorded an episode in the park around this time last year.
Yeah, and it was probably, as best we can tell based on the maps and stuff, probably along one of the riverbeds that might have been part of the problem.
Yeah. One of the
Just because it was
places
so
where we
low.
were, the place where we recorded probably was underwater.
I'm sure it had to have been because it was very low even last year.
Yep.
So, hoping that Yellowstone can just reopen. I'm less. I don't know. We've kind of talked about this, you and I, just about like, we're trying to harness nature, and maybe this is nature being like, nope, this is mine, and I kind of like it, but I also I love Yellowstone so much that I want people to be able to experience it. So it's like you know what I mean? I think Yellowstone is important.
Yeah,
but
it's
I think
a difficult balance.
Yeah, it is.
The ecology, keeping it all.
Because I wish everybody could see it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's beautiful.
It is, and it's tough out there. That's a whole other world from Ohio. It's hard to imagine. So, okay, that is our first annual
year in review. We made it.
Coming to you live in year 3 of the podcast.
Just don't ask too many questions about why we started our first annual.
We are still
year
figuring this
3.
thing out. Also, we started this thing in 2020, so the first year is basically a wash.
Yeah, it doesn't count because it was COVID pod.
So this is year 2. But that's fine. It takes a while to figure it out.
It does.
You don't get like a greatest hits album until, you've put out a few.
It's true.
So this is our greatest hits.
Our greatest hits album.
One of these times, Chelsea will sit down and pull together some of the best moments
Yeah.
that either have made it or have not made it. That would just be great without context to share.
That would be fun. Maybe a bonus episode or something.
Yeah, and then we can go back through and try to imagine what we were talking about. That'd be great. But anyways, we will see you next time.
We will.
Hopefully by then the earth has cooled off just a little bit.
Stay cool, stay hydrated.
And
Wear
we'll talk to you
your sunscreen.
soon.
We'll see ya.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. Do I need my serotonin boosted?
Seem very upset.
Let me see if this other sip of cold brew will help it.